Hi everybody. Today we're going to continue talking about context clues, and we're going to do a little review of what we've already learned about context clues, and then we're going to get 3 new strategies for figuring out the meanings of unknown words in a text using context clues. So this is what we've already done. We've already talked about looking at what the text says plus what you already know to find the meaning of the word. And so last week you did some work with finding the answers to some meanings of different words like citizenship. And then today, this week, we're going to kind of up it a little bit. We're going to be working on some complicated words that you may have never seen before. I know everyone's seen the word citizenship before. So we're going to talk about 3 new ways to find the meanings of words using context clues in a text. So sometimes a text will give you examples, and they'll use examples in the text. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to look at today. Another way to use context clues in the text is sometimes the text will give you synonyms. So that'll be our second way that we're going to be covering today. And then finally, the third way that a text might give you some clues to the meaning of a difficult word or phrase is they might use antonyms in the text. So that will be the third thing that we're going to cover today. So I'm going to minimize my screen. And so on our screen now, we have what are context clues. Now, we already know what context clues are, so this will just be a quick review for us. Context clues are words or groups of words that give clues about the meaning of an unknown word. Y'all already knew that. You can use context clues in a sentence or paragraph to determine the meaning of an unknown word in any type of reading passage. Context clues can show up in text as examples, definitions, synonyms, antonyms, or contrasts. Sometimes the general context or feel of the writing can also provide clues that help the readers determine the meaning of unknown words. Okay, so our first one that I said we were going to be focusing on was examples. Sometimes specific examples are used in writing to help readers understand difficult or unknown words. The following words or phrases are indicative of this type of context clue. That means it indicates that it's going to be this kind of clue. So you might come across words and phrases like such as, including, consists of, like, and for example. And the example they give you: during a tornado, be aware of potential hazards such as broken glass and sharp objects. In this sentence, the writer gives specific examples of hazards related to tornadoes. These examples provide clues about the meaning of that word. So the hazards that I see in this sentence are broken glass and sharp objects. So I think that that's going to make me know that the word hazards means something dangerous. The next way that we can use context clues that I said we would be covering was synonyms. So that's going to be this page. Synonyms or definitions as clues. So sometimes synonyms or definitions are used in writing to help readers understand difficult or unknown words. In these cases, you might see a comma after the unknown word followed by a synonym or a short definition of the word. The example that they give: if you are in a tall building during a tornado, locate the nearest interior enclosure or room to seek shelter. In this sentence, the writer uses a synonym for the word enclosure to provide a clue about the meaning of the unknown word. So here I see the word enclosure, and then it's followed by a comma, and it says or room to seek shelter. So that tells me that an enclosure is another word for a room. And then the last way that we can use context clues that I said we would be covering is antonyms. Antonyms or contrasts as clues. Sometimes antonyms or contrasts are used in writing to help readers understand difficult or unknown words. In these cases, the writer may use an obvious antonym. In other cases, an idea or thing is compared to show a contrast. So, for example, sometimes tornadoes develop so rapidly that there is no time to send a warning. Other times, tornadoes develop gradually and there is more time to provide advance warning. In this sentence, the writer uses a contrast for the word gradually, rapidly, by including the phrase other times. This contrast provides the reader with a clue about the meaning of the word gradually. So I see in the sentence, sometimes they develop rapidly, and I know that means quickly, so that there's no time. And then I have my contrast. Other times, so that's going to tell me that it might be the opposite. Other times, tornadoes develop gradually, and there's more time to provide advance warning. So that tells me that gradually means it happens over time. It's the opposite of quickly. Okay. Today you're going to be using those three strategies, and you're going to be reading a piece of text, and this text is actually pretty cool because it talks about English language learners. So if you're learning English as a second language, like let's say you grew up and you only learned how to speak Spanish, or you only learned how to speak French, and then you're trying to learn English. We've talked a lot about this in class before we even left for this whole pandemic. We've talked a lot about using idioms and how funny idioms can sound to somebody if, they didn't know what blow me away meant. They might say, why would I ever want to blow my teacher away? That's crazy, right? And then, they might be thinking, who's going to like puff up their breath and try to blow on their teacher? They would think that's so weird. But you guys know that it means impress, right? So today we're going to be reading a text about learning English as a second language and how hard it can be for learners to get all of these new idioms that we use in our language. And that's what you're going to be reading about today. Now, there's going to be 10 big words that we're going to be focusing on. And some of these words you might not have ever have heard. So I want to give you a little preview of the 10 words that you're going to be reading. And I also want to let you see them and hear them pronounced so that you know how they're pronounced. Okay, so our first word that you're going to be reading in our text today is going to be the word nuances. Now, this might be a totally new word for you guys, so we're going to be using some context clues to figure out the meaning of the word nuances. The next word is subtle, and so that B is silent, subtle. The next word, arduous, arduous. Next, you might have heard of this word before. Complicates, complicates. This one is a tricky one. Acquisition, acquisition. This word, nonsensical. And if you hear in this word, I hear a word that maybe sounds more familiar to me, nonsensical. Did y'all hear the word nonsense in there? That might give us some clues to what that word might mean. This one you might know already what the meaning is, but I threw this one in there for fun. Belongings, belongings. Laborious, laborious. Now in this one, I see the word labor, and I know that labor can mean work. Maybe that might have something to do with the meaning of this word. Exhilarating. You might have heard that one before, exhilarating. And finally, this word, incorporate, incorporate. Okay, so now that I've shown you all of those big words, and you might have heard some of them before, and some of them you might never have heard of before, we're going to take a look at the text you're going to be reading. Okay, so the title of this text is That Figures. And I'm going to read this out loud to you, and then I'm also attaching a Google Doc with this document on it. And then you're going to have some questions to answer about this document. So let me go ahead and read it, and you can follow along with me as I read. I'm starting up here at the top. Use context clues to determine the meaning of the underlined words in the following passage. Use the passage to answer the questions on the following pages. All right, the title is That Figures. And in this, I love the name of this title because we're going to be talking about figurative language, things like idioms. Can you imagine what it would be like to learn English as a second language? There are so many nuances or subtle differences in the definitions of English words. With such small differences in the meanings of words, finding just the right word can even be arduous or difficult for native English speakers. Not only are the shades of meaning tricky for people learning English, figures of speech further complicates the acquisition of English due to the nonsensical nature of figurative language. I'm going to stop right there. That was a really big sentence. So when you're trying to figure out the meanings of these context clues, the figures of speech further complicates. I know if something is complicated, that usually means it's very hard. So it makes it harder, the acquisition of English language. So not only are the shades of meaning tricky for people learning English, figures of speech further complicate or make it hard the acquisition of English due to the nonsensical nature of figurative language. Okay, well, remember I said nonsensical? I hear the word nonsense. And we all agree that sometimes our English language just contains nonsense. It's raining cats and dogs. That kind of sounds like nonsense to me, but you all know that it means raining really hard, right? All right, let's get back to our words. Let's take idioms, for example. Pretend that your teacher gives you 5 extra minutes to study for a big test by saying, you're down to the wire and you need to hit the books for 5 more minutes. Students who are learning English might wonder what kind of wire they're down to and why it's necessary to hit books. After all, we've been taught to treat our belongings with respect. With thousands of figures of speech, it's no wonder that learning all the nuances of the English language can be such a laborious task. And I hear that word laborious, I think labor, working. It doesn't have to be so difficult though. Learning figures of speech can also be exhilarating and hilarious. If you're not so sure about that, try to incorporate art in your learning. Have you ever drawn a frog in your throat? How about painting your head in the clouds? So those are 2 idioms right there. A frog in your throat and painting your head in the clouds. Creating your own figures of speech can also be silly and fun. Remember the difficulties of learning English the next time you meet someone acquiring the language. Lend them a hand, shoot the breeze, and bend over backwards to ensure that your new friend understands the subtle and not so subtle words and phrases with multiple meanings. Whew, there were a lot of new words in there. So what you're going to be doing today is you're going to be filling out a Google form. And you're going to use this article to answer the questions on the Google form. So yours doesn't look like this. Yours looks like a Google form, but I'm just going to slide down to the questions real quickly. I retyped these questions for you, but just looking at number 1, we have to use the context clues to determine